Mike here from Radio Student 89.3 in Lana here with Mr. Kelvin Johnson of the Happening of Go Team of K Records and other things who will be performing tonight at Rolgeplatz Boris. And I'm just here to ask him a few questions. Now, Kelvin.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us today. The first, and I think that all I generally want to do is kind of pick your brain as someone who was around when a lot of the currents that currently define like underground music in the world in general were taking shape. That's kind of going to be where I'm going to be coming from, if that's cool.
Fabulous.
Excellent. First question. Your reputation precedes you quite literally, I would say, in that the scene you were once part of, that you helped start in Olympia in the early 1980s, has taken on mythic proportions. You have books by Michael Ezerad and more recently by Mark Spitz that discuss that kind of go into detail about the scene around Chaos and then K Records in Olympia. Of course, there's a feature-length documentary, The Shield Around the K. And as an avid consumer of the past, I'd say these works like really inspire a kind of longing, a kind of wish to be able to do something like that, or even a sort of naive desire to go back in time when there seemed to be this sense of purity around the music, when you could do something on your own terms and stay true to this non-commercial ethos and build a small, tightly knit community around that, and at the same time, by doing that, alter the global musical landscape in profound ways. How do you
But your question implies that you can't do that right now. Why not? Go for it.
Can I just get to the question part?
Oh, okay.
Because it's also kind of classy. How do you address that myth in 2015? What do you say to the impressionable, starry-eyed teenager of today who's busy broadening his musical horizons, learning the history, and who comes across Tales of Chaos and K and the International Pop Underground Festival and just thinks, wow, I wish I could do something like that, or even
then do it.
To do something like
Go
that.
Go for it. That's what I say.
It's all good?
Do it.
Nothing's changed?
The world is a much better place. The musical landscape is so much more exciting now than it was then, and the opportunities are so much greater. So go for it. Don't sit around reading about things that happened 30 years ago. Do what's happening right now. Be what's happening right now.
Awesome. So that's kind of a continuation. You can just be like yes to this one, obviously, which you probably will be. Do you feel the internet then can become a space of change? Do you think artists who form communities over the internet specifically can create collective identities that really challenge our perceptions of what music is? The similar way to what you've been doing over
It's a tool. It's what you make of it. You take it and you create whatever you create out of it. It's just another tool.
It's just another tool. But you don't, the physical dimension that you had in a place where you kind of crafted a local scene in a place, is that a key element in building something like that, or can online only
exists.
scene?
It exists. Every place is its own world. Here we are in Slovenia. I don't know anything about Slovenia. I don't know anything about where we are right now. I assume, but look at this place. It's incredible. I'm in this amazing space that obviously somebody took the time to make a place where things can happen and people can create, people can express themselves. That's happening right here, and it can't happen anywhere else. It can only happen here. So let's celebrate that and enjoy it and bask in it.
Awesome. And is the internet a kind of place? Is there a virtual equivalent as far as a place goes? Can the internet be that as well?
If you want it to, but it's, like I said, it's just a tool. It's a tool that you use to whatever ends you desire.
Awesome. Starting as you did in the early 1980s, just as the cassette was picking up steam and gradually overtaking vinyl, and then following through into the 1990s as the CD became the dominant media, and then into the 2000s with the MP3 and digital formats. As both an artist and label head, and I assume as a listener, your work happened to take place in a very interesting, very dynamic, one could even say turbulent period in the history of music media. I'd like to ask you, do you feel a special affinity for particular kinds of media, either out of technical or out of sentimental reasons?
Well, for whatever reasons, I prefer the vinyl format for listening.
Okay.
That's what I listen to.
Okay.
But I understand that that is not for everyone. It's fine. I make no judgment on that. People do whatever they want, and they're going to no matter what I say anyway. So it's great. What's great is that there is a variety of formats available, and people have the option to pursue whatever strikes their fancy.
Excellent. So then, so yeah, in that sense, and I guess this is actually just a continuation of the past question. I imagine that's your attitude to like the comeback that's been happening with cassettes and vinyls over the past.
Great. If that works for people, go for it. Yeah. But I think that the majority of people, it's all an illusion, really. The majority of people are just going to stream music. They're just going to listen to digital music. That's what they're going to do. That's what they do. That's just the way it is. There's no big deal. It's not a problem. It's just reality. The comeback of CDs or cassettes or vinyl is just an illusion that people like to write about in magazines.
But it is what it is in the end.
People listen to it. Great. If that's what they like, that's a wonderful thing for their life.
Cool. Now, the flyer for the event tonight, I don't know if you know this, it's a really beautiful flyer too. I think it's really nice. It lists you simply as like under your name, like under like the artist name, there's usually like a bit of information, like a label or a genre. And you are listed, and this is a translation, as indie rock legend, USA, which I think is awesome, if only because it goes in the face of some really tired flyer cliches that are typical of the scene over here. And a big shout out to the organizers for that. But how do you feel about the word indie today? I mean, you were there when both indie the word and indie the thing kind of came into shape, but today, as you know, it's like...
Well, it's not something that it's not a word that I have ever used.
Seriously?
I don't, I'm interested in music. As a music nerd person, the concept of independent distribution has always been important to me. And independent artists, underground artists, I use the term underground because it does not imply any specific genre.
Okay.
So that is what if someone asks me, what kind of music do you make? I say contemporary.
I like that. That's good. Okay, and you're performing tonight as part
of... I'm looking forward to it. It'll be my first time here.
Excellent. But I don't know if you're with it, but it is part of the City of Women Festival. That's an annual festival in Lugana that addresses not only women artists, but art and non-normative identities in general. The theme of this year's festival is My Body, My Territory, and to quote the organizers, the focus is on art practices that address the body as a territory of social or political processes and reflections which allow others to weave social fabrics outside the capitalist market, practices that provide a chance to freely imagine relationships not based on domination and strive to reform and break social norms. With that in mind, I think your performing here really makes sense considering how you've challenged traditional images of men in rock music, and I'd just like to ask you how the idea of occupying a non-traditional space in terms of gender identity has shaped and continues to shape what you do as an artist. Big question.
I'm not really worried about it. Although I think that there has been a consciousness to a certain extent to, when possible, neutralize the songs. And this, going back, not all songs from Beat Happening were gender neutral, but quite a few were that didn't have to be.
Okay.
But some weren't. I mean, I think that's okay. There's nothing wrong with me singing about a girl. Right. You know, that's just the way it is. But sometimes with a song that's about a feeling, I don't want it to be about any particular boy, girl, or she, he, or anything. So I want it to be about the feeling itself and take out the emphasis of that. And that was definitely something that's been in my mind all the time I've been making music, even before gender became an issue. It was just something that was in the back of my mind. So I feel like what I'm doing is I am following in that tradition, perhaps.
Okay.
And I'm happy to be seen as part of that. as part of that storyline, I'm happy to see that. But I didn't know about this festival. It sounds really exciting, though. I'm excited to be part of it, and I look forward to seeing the other performers that are taking place.
As we are all, I think. It's excellent. And maybe just one last question, just going to be kind of like technical.
Certainly.
On the internet today, one finds everything. One also finds early beat happening videos, which I think are just awesome. Like the video for Bewitched is so fucking cool. You really rock that.
Thank you.
And I was just like really curious, considering that the VCR wasn't really so much of a thing back then, and well, I'm guessing you didn't have your sights set on MTV. What was the purpose of those videos, and how are they like used and distributed? Why did you shoot them with like either one in mind?
Well, that's a good question. It's a very boring question, because the answer is nothing. I'm
a more boring kind of nerd, so
no, it's not. I'm not making a judgment on you. I'm just saying that it's the kind of question that has a very specific answer, but it's not a very exciting answer. But it draws into question some of these issues that you brought up earlier in terms of formats. What formats are available at different times, and which formats dominate, and why. And so your question is one that most people wouldn't ask, because they are unaware that there was a world before, not just the internet, but before YouTube, which came after the internet, But the fact is that there are a variety of formats available, and video formats, and the VHS was the dominant commercial consumer format during the era that you're talking about in the 80s, but it wasn't the dominant production format.
Right, that would be the Betamax. Right?
So people used, if they were making a video, they weren't using VHS tapes. They were using much higher quality tapes that would then be edited down to the consumer format. Well, though many of the videos that we made at that time we weren't even using the high quality video. We were using what would have been considered at the time a very, very low quality film called Super 8 film. And so that right away, we were automatically disqualified from ever being included on MTV because we were shooting on Super 8.
Right.
That was just like, forget it. There's no way. So, but our friends wanted to make the movies. They were like, can we make a movie of you guys? We're like, yeah, let's do it. So it was really just for fun.
Okay.
And so our friend Lois and Pat Malley, Randall Hunting, different people worked on different videos, but I think that in terms of that, Bewitched was the first official video that we made. It was for the second album, and Lois ended up making a couple other ones. She did Halo Bender's video, and Pat Malley shot a few, and it was just a fun thing to do because we wanted to. And there was no outlet.
Oh, there wasn't?
There was no way to even if we wanted to be on MTV. I mean, not that we wouldn't. We would want to be on MTV.
Right.
But if we wanted to be, you had to submit your video in these very specific formats, which were expensive to create. And they assumed that you had made your video in that format to begin with, which we were making it in this lower format. We'd have to bring it up to their level and then duplicate it and then send it to them in a certain number of quantities. It was a very complicated procedure. And then you just sit around waiting for them to tell you that they didn't want to show it. Or maybe like, okay, we're going to show it one time at 3 a.m. on Sunday. So, I mean, it just was you had to spend an awful lot of money and time to get very little return. There might have been some local shows that would play it. Again, maybe only once. And again, you would have to submit it to them on these formats, which were difficult to get to. So it really was just, we made it because we wanted to. And that's all, If someone was like, I love your video, can I show it? We're like, sure. But it wasn't like, there was no organized effort to distribute the video to clubs, to cable TV to music channels or anything like that. It was just, we made it, we're done. That's it. And then here it is 30 years later and people are seeing it, and because we had no idea that there would ever be these other ways to see. I was just reading a fanzine from the 70s that I really enjoy. It's called Kicks. And it was a fanzine done by Billy Miller and Miriam Lina, who run a record label called Norton in New York City. And but they originally were doing a fanzine before the record label. And the fanzine was about rock and roll. And at the time, this is like 75 or 76, when I was a teenager, I used to read Kicks, but I got to Kicks with issue number 2. And issue number 1 had sold out, and I never got to hold of it. But because of some of the, there was a hurricane that devastated the coast of New Jersey and New York a couple years ago. And so somebody reprinted the first issue of Kicks as a fundraiser that they distributed and sold to raise money for people who were affected by the hurricane. So I was like, whoa, Kicks number 1, reprinted, great. So I picked it up and I was really excited to read it because I'd never read it. And it was fascinating. The point of the story, to bring it back to where we were about videos, is there was an article there were so many articles in here that were just mind-blowingly 1975. So 40 years ago, they had no idea, And so one of the articles was talking about TV shows that had rock and roll in them, like situation comedies from the 60s that had 60s bands playing, like suddenly, the Standells appearing on the Munsters. Oh, cool. And to us it was like, oh my God, the Standells were on the Munsters? I wish I could see that. And so you might watch the Munsters. The Munsters would be serialized, and every day at 3 o'clock you could go and watch the Munsters on hope that the show with the Standells is going to come on. And you go, oh my God, I saw the Standells on the Munsters yesterday. It was incredible. But so this guy was cataloging all the shows from the 60s and early 70s that had all these rock bands in them, and he was like saying, well, in New York City, because the only way you could see these shows, they had been off the air for years, is that they had been serialized and they might be available on some of these stations that showed old reruns.
The UHF stations.
Sometimes UHF, and sometimes the non-network affiliated stations. Would have like reruns all day long of different shows. So this article was saying, here's all the shows that you should try to see, with what bands played on them, and but of course in New York we only have these shows on these stations, and somebody should really and this is before VHS. Yeah, so he's talking about somebody should videotape these so we can watch them. He means this big tape machine like this with a reel of video. No, it wasn't even a cassette. It was like a reel of video that you had to spool onto it, and then you had to know that this was going to be the show you wanted to tape, or you just taped every one and taped over the ones that weren't the ones you were. I mean, it was very elaborate. But his idea was like, if someone doesn't tape it now, it will be lost forever. We will never see these shows again because they will stop rerunning them in a year or two. And then we will never see them. They will never be available to us. Wow. And it was like, that's right. We will never see them.
Nope, that's it.
But it's a really cool. It was neat to read their perspective, which is anyway. It just because like when so and so is going to be on some TV show, you were like, okay, the only chance to see that was 8 o'clock on Thursday.
Right.
And then maybe in the summer it would rerun. And that would be your other only chance to see it. And then after that, it's gone forever. And so there was a certain kind of excitement about Pill being on on TV, or the Jam being on American Bandstand, because like, oh my God, it's a chance to see the Jam. Oh my God. So I forget what your question was. You asked about Bewitched.
This is awesome. I mean, this is just like kind of nerd stuff that I like go crazy about. But yeah, just the original videos, but that really is great. Mm-hmm. That really is awesome. And I think that's it.
It was truly awesome and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Just thank you for the care. It was great. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you perform.
All right.